All right, welcome back to this episode of Faith Infused Leadership. I am your co-host Meredith Banka here with our host Debbie Heiser, and today we're talking about a big topic, a huge one because I think it's lacking, and it's probably why we're talking about it. But it's the T word. It's trust.
It is the T word. Thank you, Meredith. Yeah, trust is a big one. We've talked before on this podcast about trusting your team and how to help your team trust you. But this one is really important. And as you said, I think is missing a lot. And it goes back to self-worth, but it's really about trusting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of different avenues to this. So I'm going to shut up and let you take us whichever avenue you want to
Well,
go.
so many layers to this, right? I mean, there's so many layers, and um, I think where I would start the conversation really is around what is trust. What is the true meaning of that for us as individuals and as leaders, and how do you think of trust in your life?
Wow, Meredith, nothing like going for the jugular there. Big puppy. Um, so I'm going to trust that I come out with a really solid answer.
I know you
Um, Trust to me is really bound also in my faith and knowing that if I am connected to the divine, which for me is God, if I'm connected to God and his spirit, then those things that come to me, like I'm to a point anymore after practicing meditation and listening that it's palatable for me. And I call them divine downloads. Like I get these down, like sometimes almost overwhelmingly so. And then it's about discernment, which is also trust.
mm-hmm.
And trust really is almost coincides with my definition of faith that if I wanted to use the word trust, if I feel it to the core of my bones, and I know for some of you that is going to be really hard to digest because for many years I was in my head and didn't understand what it meant to feel it in your bones. But I think everybody has had some type of experience that they knew the decision they were making. Like I'm just going to use that as an example. The decision they were making was the right one or the wrong one.
Mm-hmm.
You had these gut reactions to it, but we either choose to listen to those gut reactions or we choose to shut them down.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're personal, sometimes they're work-based. So as an example, I remember when I worked for a company called Sprint Publishing and Advertising. They sold to another Yellow Page industry, so I'm aging myself, sold to another Yellow Page company. At that time, my husband and I had made the decision that we were going to pick up our family and move from Kansas City to North Carolina. In the process of that, my mother had breast cancer and was dealing with this breast cancer, and we lived about a mile from her. I was very, very close to her. So we both felt like we were making the right decision. We woke up, both of us, at the same time, like at 3 a.m. in the morning on the same night, and looked at each other and said, what are we doing? Something gut worthy doesn't feel right about this.
Mm-hmm.
And so we both looked at each other and said, this is mind blowing, right? That we both had the same experience at the same exact time. But we trust each other and trust ourselves enough to know then that this isn't the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes too, what I find is that trust comes about when I observe with curiosity. If I realize that I'm moving forward with something or I'm making a decision about something, I'm trying to keep this kind of business oriented, or if I choose to do something, it's usually when I have that gut reaction, I either have the gut reaction positively because I feel like I'm going the right direction, or a lot of times if my intention is because I think that's what I should do, then right there's a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
If I think I should go do something because the critical parent in me is saying you should follow this route, right? You shouldn't move to Idaho when I moved here. I would have been looking at that and saying, okay, is this That's where you question, right? And that discernment. But I had a gut reaction to that like, I wanted to move to Idaho so bad, but I said, oh my gosh, my tribe is all here, right? Except my one sister, and I don't want to leave. And so that became fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is sometimes difficult to discern that if you haven't had practice between the fear and the love.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes it also takes a trusted friend, but it's not necessarily, you don't want to go to the person that's going to tell you what they think you want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
You want to go to somebody that's going to tell you the truth. So I had that experience when we decided to move to Idaho. I'm like, yeah, well, the decision wasn't made yet. I was like, yeah, that would be great. I need to let my friend Colleen know if I'm going to take this position that she's offering me. And I'm talking to my best friend about it. And, she's like, okay, well, you need to make a decision. And I'm like, I know I need to make a decision. And then she's talking to my husband and she's thinking it's him. And she's like, hey, Brent, why aren't you moving here? What's up with that? And he goes, it's not me, it's Debbie. So there was a little bit of twistedness there, but then she comes back and she's like, make a decision. Like, what is it that you want? And so it took her kind of confronting me in love to say, stop the madness, right? Like, what does your gut tell you to do?
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that deviated a little bit from trust, but I wanted to give an example, like two different examples of where it was very clear to me what to do. And then another one that it was clear, but I was afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And that fear was slowing me down or stopping me from doing it. And so trust can be convoluted sometimes when that happens.
And I want to throw in something that you said when you were talking about should immediately, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. To me, that applies a layer of judgment.
Absolutely.
And trust is void of judgment,
Mm-hmm.
right? When you trust, you're not judging. You're not judging yourself. It's a knowing. And so to me, there's a differentiation. If I find myself placing judgment or opinion or thought, then I'm moving away from trust. But if I'm allowing myself to just step into the knowing, then I would call it a knowingness of trust, then that's very different. And those are those moments of clarity to me. And for me, they're very quick. It's very much a Malcolm Gladwell blink. So I don't know if you have the same situation, but when I know that I'm trusting in myself and trusting of myself, decision making, taking action is very simple actually, and can be very fast and very rapid. It's when I'm applying all of these other distractions that the train just slows way down.
And sometimes stops. And it's
Completely
harder
like
to start. Yeah. Yeah. And I will say, Meredith, I mean, in all honesty, I'm there now because I've really learned to trust my discernment. I've learned to trust that knowing. But before that happened, I used to have to make a pro and con list. Like there were definite concrete things, and there are still some decisions that I write down a pro and con list. I was looking for a rental property that I could rent out, like purchasing a home to rent in my town. And as I was looking at it, I thought, wait, I know this is the right direction I need to go. The way the market is so inflated right now, like I literally sat down and did a pro and a con. And
Mm-hmm.
said, yes, all the pros of me wanting to find this rental are good, but there's a really big con right now, and that is the inflated market. And so I had to like physically see that. I had to logically see that
Mm-hmm.
in order to then make that decision. And so some of you listening are going to go, wow, she's sounding woo-woo-y. We just feel it. It's a knowing. And for us, it is. It doesn't mean that it's a judgment or a bad if you make a pro and con list. We all think differently.
Mm-hmm.
And we all accept that discernment in a different way. And so it is a great tool to list a pro and con list down.
Well, and I think making a pro and con list is simply trusting yourself and the process that you need to complete in order to make a decision from a place of trust. So that's
Absolutely.
just, so there's no reason to have guilt around applying process, because in that of itself you're trusting. So
Absolutely. Well, and
yeah.
Meredith, I want to go to that just a little bit on trust, but a slightly different twist to it. In the relationship too, I was discussing some stuff with a client, and they were saying, well, I didn't realize, like, I don't think I got paid for this. And they weren't tracking their invoicing very well. And so, coming up with a solution for that. But Um, Ultimately, they said as they started to list down all of the invoices and the actual payments they received, they actually realized they were receiving those payments, right? So they trusted in a different way, in a negative connotation of
Mm.
thinking it wasn't coming to them, which then created scarcity instead of actually taking the time to use a tool like a pro and con. So it's slightly different, but like the invoices and the payments to show that they were in fact, which then left that resentment, created an open space for them to think in abundance. So
That's
that trust can be used in multiple different ways, but it's so critical that we learn to trust ourselves. And Meredith, I'm going to go in a different angle because we live in a society. There are all these societal systems that can create lack of trust in our
mhm,
own discernment, lack of trust in what we feel to the core of our bones about something, right? And some of that's pressure. What are people going to say about me? What are people going to think about me?
mhm.
Some of it is internal, that you think, like you have some loyalty pacts to your tribe, and this is the way the tribe has always done it. And that means personal or organizationally, right? You have organizations that create um, realms for you to maneuver in, right? And sometimes that's outside of that, and so then you have to do some additional thinking about whether you're in alignment with that organization. So I kind of went off on a different strategy there with trust, but that all of those are really critical and relevant.
For sure. And I think as leaders, when you trust yourself, it's evident to the people with whom you're leading, right? So, leadership to me, a lot of it is the transference of certainty, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's
so,
good.
is if I'm transferring my certainty, I can't have certainty in a decision. I can't have certainty in an action, in a plan, in anything unless I have trust,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so if you're as a leader going out there and trying to get a group of people to move in a direction, to completion, to progress, to whatever it is, and you don't have trust, it's known, right? Like it can be felt, it can be seen, it may not be entirely tangible. So as leaders, if we're approaching a situation and we feel a lack of trust, what do we do?
Hmm. That is a great question. And I come up with two immediate answers that come to mind. I talked about earlier finding a group of friends. An example is the course I teach at Gonzaga has a 3.5 day immersion.
Mhm.
We are needing to put this immersion online, and it's a lot of energy work and discernment with energy. So it's really difficult to try to do that in an online environment.
Mhm.
So I have a collaborative group of people that we've been meeting that I trust wholeheartedly. And we've been working on developing things to put in that class. So that's an example of, not just one person, but collaborating with a few to see, like what would work and being able to get their perspectives. The other piece of it um, just left my head. Holy cow. And it was a really good one. Maybe I have been playing too much.
The question was, so as leaders, if we're feeling a lack of trust, then what do we do? Right. And so part of that could be circling around the people who give us that direct feedback, who we can share with and who trust us. But what else would we do in that situation? To me, I would go a little bit within, and I would say, what is it that I need to have here in order for trust to be created,
Yeah.
right? What is that? It could be a conversation, it could be clarity of information, it could be setting aside my own fear, my own doubt, understanding that, but asking why am I feeling this lack of trust, and taking care of that before I go to try to lead my group.
Yeah, and it's important, I think, to do both, kind of the heart work and getting with people and collaborating, and then also, to your point, really taking a look at your intention behind it. But I did have another example, and I don't know why, Meredith, it just left me, and so hopefully it'll come back before we're done here. But
Well, and
there are, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
well, I was going to say, there are times as leaders, um, where if there is a lack of trust, there's a specific reason for that as well. Right.
Absolutely.
And so, is it okay to be in a situation and act upon your lack of trust rather than trying to trust when your intuition is telling you not to.
Yeah, I think it
So like
depends on the situation.
yeah, kind of
Yeah.
like a blind faith situation, right? Like, are you just going to believe, or are you going to question, you know, generally?
Yeah, and I think generally is the answer there, Meredith, at least in my own experience. Even though I trust something, it doesn't mean that I always trust all of those around me to kind of be in the same mindset. And I don't want everybody to be in the same mindset. I will tell you one of the tools that I use today is, Meredith, as we're doing this, I'm trusting that if I do something that causes you some angst or causes you to feel like you're not safe sharing some things in this meeting, as far as like your ideas and your creativity, that you will let me know that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I use that as a model to say, I need to trust that you're going to do this, but I also trust you that
Mm-hmm.
you're going to tell me. And we don't live in a systematic world that always promotes that either.
Right. Or where we are actually willing to communicate that so
Yeah.
directly.
Yeah.
Right. And I think just using those words sometimes with people really, really helps, right? To say, I trust you,
Yeah.
right? I trust myself.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so
it's even as simple, Meredith, as, like people can practice this. It's even as simple. The last segment that we did was about play, and I've had company. And, some of you will put the judgment on right away with COVID, but where I live, we have very low cases. So some people are coming here to experience Sandpoint. And it's interesting because I find myself practicing it with people and saying, I'm trusting that I'm giving you multiple things that we could do. We can go to the beach, we can hike, we can kayak, we can do all these things. And I'm trusting that you're going to tell me what you really want to do.
mhm,
And that's a really good way to practice it. And it's interesting how people are sometimes a little taken back by that. And then they're like, okay, well, I can say what I want. Because
mhm,
part of trust is being able to voice what you want and allowing space for other people to say what they want without judgment.
mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So if someone wanted to know a little bit more about how you work with clients and how you help them, to come to conclusions like, what their feelings are about trust, what's a great place for them to find you, and how do you like to work with people?
Yeah, I love to work with people, and we typically do some Zoom meetings if you're not local to Sandpoint. And if they're local, I tend to meet in person and go through some belief restructuring as well as kind of what you want out of your business. And so there's a lot of trust that's built also with me as a coach. And you can find out a little bit more about how that works through my website at 3vconsulting.com or even through Facebook on my Three Vines Consulting site. And I would love the opportunity to speak with anybody that wants to talk more about trust and, how we trust ourselves and trust each other, but predominantly how we trust ourselves.
Such a great topic. So thanks so much, Debbie. For this episode of Faith Infused Leadership, I'm your co-host, Meredith Banka, here with our host, Debbie Heiser, and we will see you all the next time.
Bye, everybody.